Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Sikhism.
Long ago, the four
Religions
lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when
British,
the nation attacked. Only
a master of peace,
could stop them.
and
When the world needed him most, he
fought nonviolently. About
100 years passed,
we
discovered
him a peacekeeper,
named
Gandhi.
and although his
Peaceful protesting,
skills are great, he has a
long way to go,
or he's ready to
free.
anyone. But I believe
Gandhi can free India.
Long before the British arrived, India was a relatively peaceful and rudimentary country filled with many different cultures and traditions. The economy was predominantly agricultural, as the abundance of fertile soil and rivers made for an ideal farming environment. Farmers left their small homemade huts to work in the fields and provide for their families. Taxes were also paid by the farmers with the extra produce grown in their farms. Remaining crops were often traded with merchants for other valuable goods. These Muslim traders traveled long and exhausting routes across the country to exchange spices, textiles, and crafts with other traders and/or merchants. Goods were then traded by merchants for crops provided by individual families in the villages. This was a basic cycle of their agricultural economy. India was the birthplace for a few of the most popular religions practiced around the world today, such as Hinduism, dating back to 3000 BC, Buddhism, founded in 563 BC by Siddhartha Gautama, and Sikhism, a much newer religion founded in 1469 AD by Guru Nanak. Islam was also a major religion in India, although it was not conceptualized in the country. Now, obviously India is vast in size and could not be ruled by just one person. So, how are all these different regions governed? The answer was in division of power. The Mughal Empire, which controlled India at the time, would hire warriors to help build an empire and govern their own lands. These warriors and princes had control over their own regions, but still reported to Mughal emperors. This formed a sort of unitary state, or one in which central government is supreme, and administrative divisions exercise only powers that the central government has delegated to them. Local rulers, called Nawabs, supplied military support and taxes to the emperor in exchange for the right to control the income of their state. In this way, cultural, ethnic, and linguistic differences were encouraged through territorial differences. Thus, the many different regions, cultures, and peoples were preserved within the vast lands of India. British involvement in India began early in the 1600s when European ships landed in search of valuable spices. Then, the British East India Company, a joint stock company, set up trading posts on the coast of India in the 1700s. They made a profit by exploiting natural and agricultural resources such as indigo, tea, coffee, cotton, jute, and opium, then trading them off for other resources or selling them directly to Britain. For example, Britain exchanged large amounts of opium with China for tea, which was then sold in Britain for a profit. The company used divide and conquer tactics to increase their economic benefits at the same time that the Mughal Empire began to decline. The British East India Company exploited religious differences between Hindus and Muslims to instigate political controversy, then jumped in to take the control for themselves. One major event during imperialism was the Sepoy Mutiny, a violent uprising against British rule in 1857. Around this time, the British East India Company had control over a large portion of India, and had sepoys, or Indian soldiers, set up to protect trading centers. Soldiers had to bite their cartridges before loading them, and a rumor spread that the grease used to make them was derived from pork and beef fat, which was highly offensive to the Muslims and Hindus. Sepoy Mangal Pandey fired the first shot on March 29th, and the mutiny spread from there. Fighting continued for around a year, but the British eventually regained control. Mutinies were usually captured and executed immediately. Some believed that this was too civil of a punishment and kept the mutinies, waiting to exact their revenge in more brutal ways. Ultimately, the Sepoy Mutiny only led Britain to dissolve the BIEC and take full control over India. After the mutiny, India was legally considered a colony of Britain. The period following the Sepoy Mutiny, in which Britain had full colonial control over India, is referred to as the British Raj. During this time, only 20,000 British officials ruled over 300 million Indians. This is often seen as evidence that Indians could have come to peace with colonization at the time, as it would be nearly impossible for them to rule the land without the cooperation of princes, local leaders, and soldiers. Both sides believed that they were doing a favor for the other.
What? What do I think of the British being here? Well, for one, I think they should be a little more grateful. I mean, sheesh. We literally have hundreds of millions of people feeding into their economy and still they treat us like dirt. It's bloody ridiculous. About 20% of all of their exports are going to us. Don't even get me started on their army. They use all of our soldiers in all of their little battles, but then just leave us to die in the dust.
What'd they say? Ha! How ridiculous. You're telling me that these peasants actually expect us to thank them for coming all the way here and dealing with their terrible weather to provide them with a proper government? How preposterous.
So, what were the impacts of imperialism? Well, although the positives might not have made up for the negatives, there were a few advancements that came along with imperialism in India, such as the implementation of large railroad systems. There also was a social unification, as people of different cultures and religions were forced to live together. Technology brought along telephones, and the Sanitation and Health Act helped with an improvement in medicinal care. British soldiers also helped clear India of large numbers of bandits that were previously uncontrollable. Although imperialism had its nifty benefits, it also came along with devastating effects. We've already reviewed how the British overtook the Indian market and exploited it. Although imperialism had its nifty benefits, it also came along with devastating effects. We've already reviewed how the British overtook the Indian market and exploited it. Indian markets crashed as a result, and the flow of their economy was completely ruined. As Britain took advantage of all their natural resources, Indians could no longer provide for themselves as well as they could before. The ultimate cycle of trade slowly shut down, and Indians found a hard time trying to provide for themselves. This eventually led to a famine. The widespread lack of food and crops was due to the British taking advantage of farming lands to plant cash crops for maximum profit. On August 8, 1942, Gandhi launched the Quit India movement in the All India Congress Committee meeting. The next day, Gandhi, along with other leaders of the National Congress, were arrested by the British government. In response, chaotic and nonviolent strikes occurred in protest to their arrests. The Quit India movement united the Indian people against British rule. The demand for independence by the Indians could no longer be ignored. Gandhi advocated for Indians to boycott British institutions and products in a non-violent way, referred to as Swadeshi. This movement reached its peak during World War II. The Britain's economic and human resources and the attack from Japan led to their realization that they no longer needed to control India. India was then granted freedom in 1947 as separate states of India and Pakistan. After India had gained its independence, the nation simmered down and was able to form its own democratic constitution in 1950, which was influenced by that of the British common law. Just last year, India held the 2014 elections, regarded as one of the largest democratic elections in history, with more than 100 million voters than 2009, voting between Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi. India has been facing corruption, high employment, rising inflation, and a struggling economy, which acted as a central issue for the candidates throughout the elections. Although the impacts of imperialism may not be as blatantly obvious in India as other countries, the idea of democracy will always stay with India.